She was just a janitor at the base until the SEAL captain called her, "Ma'am, my name is Rebecca Mitchell. I'm 28 years old and I never imagined my life would change so drastically because of 2 syllables, ma'am. 6 months ago, I was just another janitor at Naval Air Station Coronado in San Diego, California, one of dozens of contractors who kept the base running behind the scenes while American heroes trained for missions most civilians would never hear about. I cleaned toilets, swept hallways, emptied trash cans, and became practically invisible as the days went by. And honestly, I liked it that way. After 2 disastrous years at the local community college, followed by a series of bad jobs in coffee shops and department stores, getting a stable job as a janitor at the military base felt like a blessing. The pay wasn't fabulous, but it was consistent. People generally ignored me, which meant I could work in peace, listening to podcasts about military history while I cleaned. And most importantly, it was a connection, however tenuous, to the world my father loved so much. My father, Thomas Mitchell, was a CAL, a Navy SEAL, for almost 20 years before he died on a mission that was never fully explained to our family. I was 16 when uniformed officers appeared at our door. My mother instantly broke down, as if she had rehearsed that moment every day since she married Dad. I stood there, strangely calm, receiving the condolences and vague details about heroic service to the nation that explained absolutely nothing about how or why my father wouldn't be coming home. After that, my mother turned to alcohol. I immersed myself in books about special forces and military operations, and we both drifted apart. She moved to Arizona with a new boyfriend a few years later, while I stayed in San Diego, feeling that somehow I would be closer to my father's ghost if I remained near the water. And so working at the base, even as a janitor, was a way to feel some connection to him. I didn't talk about it, of course. Nobody there knew I was Thomas Mitchell's daughter. My name tag simply said R. Mitchell, and I preferred it that way. I didn't want special treatment or pitying. I just wanted to do my job and, occasionally, watch the young recruits training in the distance, imagining my father in that position decades ago. So, on an ordinary day in April, while I was cleaning the main hallway of the administrative building, something unusual happened. The door to the meeting room suddenly opened and a group of officers rushed out. Among them, I immediately recognized Captain Alexander Hay, one of the most respected SEAL commanders on the base, known for his strictness and the impressive number of successful missions under his command. The officers seemed tense, speaking in hushed voices amongst themselves, and I quickly pressed myself against the wall, trying to become even more invisible than usual. That's when Captain Hayes stopped abruptly, turned to me and said, "Excuse me, ma'am? Do you know where Admiral Peterson's office is?" "Ma'am?" He called me ma'am. Not young lady, not hey, you. Nor did he simply ignore me as most officers did. Ma'am, the term of respect reserved for women in positions of authority. And most surprisingly, he had stopped, in the midst of what seemed to be an urgent situation, to address me politely. For a second, I was paralyzed. The other officers also stopped, looking at me. A 5'4" woman, brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, wearing a gray cleaning uniform, holding a mop, as if I were someone important. "Third floor, sir. Second door on the right when you exit the elevator," I replied automatically, mentally thanking my obsession with memorizing the building's layout during my lonely night shift. "Thank you, ma'am," he replied with a quick nod before leading his group toward the elevators. The silence that followed was strange. The other officers looked at me as if trying to decipher a code. One of them, a young lieutenant whose name I knew to be Daniels because I cleaned his office every morning, seemed particularly confused. As they entered the elevator, I could hear him ask in a low voice, "Sir, do you know her?" I didn't hear Captain Hayes' response, but the damage was already done. At that base, where hierarchy was as important as oxygen, the fact that a CLL captain treated a cleaning lady with the same respect he would show a superior officer was ... remarkable, and that was just the beginning. The next day, while I was cleaning the main gym, I noticed people were looking at me differently. 2 young, muscular, and typically arrogant SEAL recruits who would normally scoff at my presence or, at best, ignore me were now waving respectfully. "Good morning, ma'am," one of them said, eliciting surprised looks from the others around. In the mess hall, a cook who had never exchanged more than 2 words with me in 6 months of work suddenly asked if I wanted some freshly baked apple pie before it was served to the officers. "Captain Hayes stopped by to talk to you yesterday," she said quietly, as if that explained everything. And so, without me doing anything other than existing and answering a simple question, a rumor began to spread around the base. The ordinary-looking cleaning lady was someone important, someone connected, someone whom Captain Hayes himself treated with respect. At first, I thought it was funny, then confusing. Finally, I started to worry. If this continued, someone would inevitably ask about my past, my history, my connection to the SEALs, and I wasn't ready for that. I decided I needed to clear things up with Captain Hayes before the rumor got completely out of control. After my shift, instead of going straight home as I normally would, I waited near the officer's parking lot, knowing he usually left around 7 p.m. when I saw him walking towards his car, a black Jeep Wrangler with no special embellishments typical of men who prefer not to draw attention. I gathered my courage and approached him. "Excuse me, Captain Hayes, may I speak with you for a minute?" He turned around and for a brief moment seemed not to recognize me. Then, his blue-gray eyes lit up with recognition. "Of course," he said, his voice softer than I expected from a man of his reputation. "You're the ... clerk who helped me find the Admiral's office yesterday." "Yes, sir. Rebecca Mitchell." I offered my hand, which he shook firmly. "I've been a caretaker here at the base for about 6 months. How can I help you, Miss Mitchell?" I took a deep breath. "Sir, since yesterday when you called me ma'am, people at the base have been acting differently towards me. I think they're assuming I'm someone important or that I have some kind of connection to the command. I just wanted to clarify that there's nothing special about me. I'm just a janitor." Captain Hayes studied me for a moment, his face almost unreadable. There was something in his eyes, a calm intensity that I imagined had served him well during missions under extreme pressure. "Miss Mitchell, I call any adult woman ma'am. It's a matter of basic respect, not hierarchy," he finally said. "If this caused any misunderstanding, I apologize." "No need to apologize, sir. I just wanted to clarify the situation." He nodded, but then frowned slightly. "Mitchell ... That last name sounds familiar. Do you have family in the military?" My heart raced. It was exactly the question I'd been trying to avoid for months. For some reason, in that darkened parking lot, with the cold San Diego Bay wind whipping against our faces, I decided to answer honestly. "Yes, sir. My father was a SEAL, Chief Petty Officer Thomas Mitchell." Captain Hayes's face changed immediately. The recognition was instant, followed by something that seemed almost ... reverence. "Mitch? You're Mitch's daughter?" Her voice now had a completely different tone. He was my instructor at Bud S., one of the best men I've ever known. Bud S., basic underwater, demolition, SEAL training, the infamous training that transformed ordinary men into SEAL. My father rarely talked about it at home, but I knew how seriously he took his role as an instructor. "Yes, that was my father," I said, feeling that familiar lump forming in my throat. "He passed away 12 years ago." Captain Hayes removed his cap and held it against his chest, a simple but deeply respectful gesture. "I know. The entire SEAL community felt this loss. Your father saved my life, Miss Mitchell. Not just in training, teaching me not to drown, but in the field as well. My first mission, things went wrong, and he paused, seemingly aware that he was possibly revealing classified information. Let's just say I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him." I remained silent, absorbing those words. In all these years, no one had told me specific stories about my father, only generalities about his heroism, his professionalism, his commitment. But here was someone who had real, tangible memory. "I didn't know you were working here," Captain Hayes continued. "Why not? I mean, with your family history, you could easily have ... double quotes joined the Navy, or got a better administrative job here at the base." I finished her thought. "I tried college for a while. It didn't work out. And as for joining the military, my mother begged me not to go down that path. After we lost my father, I promised her I wouldn't." He nodded, understanding. "And what about the cleaning job? How did it end up here?" I shrugged. I needed a job. And somehow, being near this place, near the people who live like my father did, it helps, even if it's just cleaning up after they've passed. Captain Hayes looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't pity, something I would be eternally grateful for, but a kind of profound understanding. Your father would be proud of you, Miss Mitchell. He always said that character has nothing to do with rank or position. My eyes burned with unexpected tears, which I quickly blinked away. Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. There was a comfortable moment of silence between us. Then Captain Hayes looked at his watch and said, I need to go, but look, we're having a small informal ceremony tomorrow night. Some of the SEAL veterans will be there, including some who served with your father. I'm sure they'd be happy to meet you. If you're interested, double quotes, I don't know if think about it, he said with a gentle smile. 7 p.m. on the deck of the training building, casual clothes. And if you decide to come, please call me Alex. I stood there in the parking lot for a long time after his Jeep disappeared, trying to process what had just happened and what it could possibly mean. That night, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours looking at old photos of my father, reading excerpts from the rare letters he sent when he was on missions, touching the Medal of Honor that had been given to my mother at her funeral. All my adult life, I had orbited around his memory, without ever really confronting it directly. Maybe it was time to change that. The next day, my shift passed in a blur. I noticed the constant stares, the respectful nods, but now they had a different meaning. It wasn't because people thought I was someone important due to a silly misunderstanding, but because I was the daughter of Thomas Mitchell, a name that apparently still meant something in those hallways. When my shift ended, instead of going home, I went to my car and got the small backpack I had packed that morning. Inside was a change of clothes, clean jeans, a simple but nice navy blue blouse, and a pair of flats. Nothing extravagant, but definitely an improvement over my work unit. In the small staff bathroom, I changed, let my hair down from its convenient ponytail, and applied a little makeup. Just enough to look like I'd made an effort, but not so much that I looked like I was trying too hard. At 6:58 p.m., I climbed the stairs to the deck of the training building, my heart pounding so hard I thought the SEALs inside could hear it. The small informal ceremony that Captain Hayes, Alex, had mentioned was considerably larger than I had expected. About 30 people were scattered across the deck, mostly men, many obviously military even in civilian clothes. Judging by their posture and regulation haircuts, some were accompanied by wives or girlfriends, and there were a few children running among the groups of adults. For a moment, I froze in the doorway, feeling completely out of place. What was I doing there? I didn't belong in this world. Not really. I was the janitor, the invisible girl with the mop. I was about to turn around when a familiar voice called out to me, "Rebecca, you came." Alex Hayes walked toward me wearing jeans and a dark blue polo shirt that made his eyes seem even more intense. He looked younger like this, less the intimidating commander and more the ordinary man. "I'm glad you decided to come. I'm still not sure if it was a good idea," I confessed. "That's a great idea," he assured me, gently placing his hand on my elbow to guide me into the party. "There are a few people I want you to." Over the next 2 hours, I was introduced to more SEAL veterans than I had ever met in my life. Men who had served with my father at various points in his career, men he had trained, mentored, commanded, men whose lives he had saved and who had saved his on numerous occasions. And each of them had a story to tell. Chief Warrant Officer Richardson, a middle-aged man with an easy smile and eyes that suggested he had seen more than his share of horrors, recounted how my father had invented a system of hand signals that saved his team during a mission in Afghanistan when communications failed. Petty Officer James, now retired and walking with the aid of a cane due to combat injuries, described how my father had carried a wounded comrade for nearly 2 kilometers under enemy fire, reciting nonsensical poetry the whole time to keep the man conscious. A man who identified himself only as Walt, whom I suspected was from the CIA because of the way others treated him, spoke about my father's unique ability to connect with civilians in war zones, gaining their trust and vital information that other teams couldn't obtain. And then there were the lighter stories, my dad winning a chili eating contest at a bar in the Philippines, My dad convincing a group of tough SEALs to sing karaoke on an off-duty mission in Japan. My dad teaching grown men to waltz before a formal Navy ball. With each story, a part of my father that I never knew was brought to life. Not the distant and infallible hero of my childhood memories, nor the tragic and idealized figure of my years of mourning, but a real man, complex, funny, imperfect, and loved. At one point, I found myself on the edge of the deck, gazing out at the ocean my father had loved so much, when Alex joined me. "How are you coping with all of this?" he asked, offering me a bottle of water. "It's intense," I admitted. "All these years, I only had my own memories and some vague stories my mother shared in the rare moments when she was sober enough to talk about him. Now, it's like a whole door has been opened to a part of his life that I never had access to." Alex nodded, understandingly. "Your father was reserved about his family when we were on duty. He protected you by keeping those two worlds separate. But he spoke of you with such pride, Rebecca. 'My girl is going to change the world someday,' he used to say." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those expectations. Well, I ended up as a caretaker, so I guess I disappointed him in that respect. "Do you think your father, a man who dedicated his life to service, often performing the most thankless and dangerous tasks that no one else wanted to do, would look at honest work and consider it unworthy?" Alex asked, his voice firm but not accusatory. "When put that way, I don't think so," I replied slowly. "But I still feel I could do more. I should do more." "And what would you like to do, Rebecca? If you could choose anything?" The question caught me off guard. I had been merely surviving, drifting from day to day, for so long that I had barely considered what I truly wanted. "I've always been fascinated by military intelligence," I confessed, "the way information is collected, analyzed, how patterns are identified. I've always had a knack for languages as well. In fact, I was studying international relations in Arabic before dropping out of college." Alex studied me with a new interest. "Do you speak Arabic?" "Not fluently, but I get by. I also speak a little Farsi and Dari. I learned them on my own, actually. After my father died, I started studying the region where where he had his last mission. I thought that maybe if I understood the place, the culture, the people, I could better understand what happened to him." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Have you considered that your skills could be valuable here? Not as a janitor, but in another department?" I laughed humorlessly. "Without a degree, with my experience, who would hire me?" "You'd be surprised," he said simply. "The Navy values practical skills as much as formal education, especially in certain areas. And, well, let's just say I'm in a position to make some recommendations." I felt a surge of hope, immediately followed by apprehension. "I don't want charity, Alex, and I definitely don't want a job just because my father was respected here. It's not charity, Rebecca. It's recognizing untapped potential, talents that are being wasted while you clean toilets." He paused. "Look, I'm not promising anything, but if you're interested, you could talk to some people in the intelligence department. See if there's a position you'd qualify for." I remained silent, considering it. Part of me wanted to refuse immediately. The same stubborn pride that had prevented me from asking for financial help when I dropped out of college, that made me choose complete independence over living with my mother and her new boyfriend, that made me hide my connection to a war hero for fear of being treated differently. But another part, perhaps the part that was still Thomas, Mitchell's daughter, recognized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept an outstretched hand. "I would consider it," he said finally, "if you really think there's a chance." His smile lit up his face in a way that made me realize how rarely I'd seen him genuinely smile until now. "Great. We'll talk more about this next week." The party began to disperse shortly afterward, and I said goodbye to the men who had known and served with my father, each of them embracing me as if I were family, which I realized I was in a way. The brotherhood of the SEALs was so strong that it extended to their families, even years after their deaths. Alex insisted on walking me to my car, and we walked in comfortable silence through the now practically empty parking lot. When we reached my old Honda Civic, I turned to say goodbye, but something in his expression made me pause. "What was it?" I asked. He hesitated, which was unusual for a man who seemed so confident in every other. Respect. I'm just trying to think of the best way to ask if you'd like to have dinner with me sometime. Not as a potential professional networking opportunity, but as a date. The surprise must have been evident on my face because he quickly added, "Sorry if that was inappropriate. It's just that, double quotes." "No," I interrupted. "I mean, it wasn't inappropriate. It was unexpected." I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. "Don't you think it would be strange? You knew my father. You were trained by him. I met your father 15 years ago, Rebecca. He was my instructor, then my superior, and finally, my friend. But that doesn't mean double quotes." He paused, searching for the right words. "It doesn't mean I can't see you for who you are, separate from him." I considered this. Throughout my adult life, I had avoided serious relationship. Part of it was self-preservation after seeing what loss did to my mother. Part of it was simply never having met someone who really interested me enough. But there was also the fact that few men I knew understood the shadow under which I lived, that of an absent, yet omnipresent, father whose heroism seemed impossible to match. Alex would understand that. Not only would he understand, but he would respect it. "Dinner would be nice," he finally said. "But I have one condition." "Which one would it be?" "No stories about my father during dinner. I want it to be about us, who we are now, not who he was then." He smiled again, that rare and genuine smile. "That seems fair." We exchanged phone numbers and he promised to call the next day to finalize the details. When I got into my car, I was surprised to find myself smiling. Not a polite or forced smile, but a genuine smile that came from a place of unexpected possibilities. The following week, 3 things happened that completely changed the course of my life. First, I had a wonderful dinner with Alex at a small Italian restaurant in Loyola, far from the base and prying eyes. We talked for hours about books, movies, places we wanted to visit, foods we loved and hated. I discovered that besides being a respected SEAL commander, he was an avid surfer, enjoyed cooking, especially Thai dishes, and had an impressive collection of old vinyl records he inherited from his grandfather. He discovered that I was obsessed with nature documentaries, could recite all the states and capitals in alphabetical order from memory, a useless but impressive trick from my childhood, and secretly dreamed of visiting Iran someday when political relations improved. At the end of the night, when he gently kissed me at the door of my small apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Second, I had an interview in the base's intelligence department, a junior analyst position that required language proficiency and attention to detail. The interview was rigorous, and I was nervous, but my self-taught knowledge of Arabic and Farsi, along with my surprisingly comprehensive understanding of Middle Eastern politics, impressed the panel of interviewers enough for them to offer me the position, on the condition that I complete my degree in evening classes, a requirement I readily agreed to. And third, during my last day as a janitor, while cleaning an office on the administrative floor, I found a framed photo on the wall that I had never noticed before. It was a picture of a SEAL team somewhere arid and mountainous, Afghanistan, probably. And there in the center was my father, younger than in my last memories of him, but undoubtedly him, with that slightly crooked smile and eyes that seemed to see right through you. Next to him was a much younger Alex, both covered in dust and sweat, but obviously proud and united by the bond that only those who have faced death together can understand. I stood there for a long time, looking at that photo, realizing that my father had never truly left me. His influence, his legacy, continued to shape my life in ways I could never have predicted. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden, but a blessing. 6 months after that fateful day when Captain Hayes called me ma'am in the hallway, my life is almost unrecognizable compared to what it was before. Now I work in the intelligence department, analyzing communications and reports from the Middle East, using skills I didn't even know I had. I'm back in college, studying international relations again, but this time with a clear purpose and institutional support. And I'm in a relationship with a man who sees me completely, not just as Thomas Mitchell's daughter, but as Rebecca, complex, imperfect, and valuable in my own right. And what about that little ma'am that changed everything? I discovered, much later, that it wasn't accidental. Alex had noticed my last name on my name tag weeks before and suspected a connection. He had observed how I worked, meticulous, observant, always attentive to details that others ignored. That ma'am had been deliberate, not charity, not pity, but recognition. Recognition that sometimes the most extraordinary people are hidden in the most ordinary places, just waiting for someone to look beyond the surface and see who they really are. I was just a janitor at the base until a SEAL captain called me ma'am, and everyone went silent. That was the beginning of my story, but it certainly won't be the end.